All right, everybody, welcome back to the Realty Rundown with the Nic Wyse team. I'm Nic Wyse. Here with me, as always, is my co-host Nathan Schwartz.
That's right.
Today we are diving into a topic that affects everyone in real estate: fair housing. Now, Fair Housing Month does not actually start until April, but that is a National Fair Housing Month. So you probably will see some initiatives. You might see some billboards, some other things that talk about that. We wanted to get out in front of things so you understand why it's such a big deal and why you're seeing the things that you're selling. So fair housing laws are designed to protect buyers, sellers, renters, and landlords from discrimination in housing. So despite these protections, unfortunately, housing discrimination is rising nationwide. Not only does it still exist, it's actually rising as far as the number of complaints that are issued out there. However, Nathan, did you know that Elkhart County, since we became a board of realtors back in the 80s, has never had, to my knowledge, disclaimer, has never had a fair housing complaint?
It is pretty awesome, though, for real. It does speak to our community's commitment to equal housing opportunities, but across the country, that's not always the case. And it's something that all real estate professionals and consumers need to be aware of.
Yeah, exactly. Sadly, it's something that does exist. Like we said, we go through training. Every couple of years, as real estate agents, we're mandated to do continuing education, and a part of that, every
Yep.
couple of years, we have to do ethics training. And this kind of falls right in line with that ethics training. We definitely promote this as a board, as a state association, and the national association. So it's really sad that it still happens. But today we're going to try and break down what fair housing laws are and why they exist, common types of housing discrimination, and real world examples we're going to try and give you, how buyers, sellers, and agents can ensure compliance with fair housing laws, and why fair housing laws matter for the future of real estate. So
Yeah.
let's get started.
Yeah. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is fair housing?
Yeah. So fair housing laws were actually established under the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So this is nothing new. At that time, it prohibited discrimination based off of race, color, religion, and national origin. In the preceding years, then we've also added on sex, disability, or familial status as well. This basically means that landlords, sellers, lenders, real estate professionals cannot refuse to sell, rent, or provide lease and financing options on those factors.
Yeah. And these protections have expanded over time, right?
They have indeed. So, yeah, originally the law covered race and national origin. Now it's going on to cover gender, disability, family status protections, as we mentioned. And some states and even local governments are now expanding these laws even further to
Hmm.
protect sexual orientation, gender identity, and source of income. So I think that's kind of
Interesting.
the source of income one is interesting. I thought about that for a minute. I don't think we have it here in Elkhart County anywhere in Indiana, but I'm like, that would probably apply maybe to like Las Vegas, somewhere like that.
Oh,
People have different sources of income.
yep. Yep.
They have obviously different laws pertaining to uh, substances, shall we
Yep.
say. If you produce your income by selling a certain substance, I guess that
Yep.
would be discriminatory in the eyes of some. So that is no longer something that can be discriminated
Hmm.
against in those areas. That's probably why Indiana doesn't have any laws, because we don't
Yep.
allow some of the things that they do in other states.
Yep. Yep.
So I did want to discuss a case that actually involved in Indiana in regard to fair housing, and this really was in regard to harassment and a hostile environment that was created. This happened in Indianapolis in a subdivision called Twin Creeks, where a lawsuit was filed against Homeowners Association and its property management company for allegedly failing to take action against a neighbor who repeatedly harassed residents based on their race. And I guess it went on for years. So this individual used racial slurs, made threats, and generally created a very hostile living environment for certain residents. The lawsuit claimed that the HOA and the management company knew about the harassment as far back as 2016 and had failed to act upon it in a legal authority. They had the legal authority to act on it and they failed to do so. So this was a federal case, and a federal judge ruled that there was enough evidence to move forward with claims under the Fair Housing Act and Civil Rights Act, saying that harassment may have interfered with the victim's right to enjoy their own home.
Hmm.
It's a wild situation. It did happen in Indiana. It's been a couple of years. I don't think that case is completely settled yet. If it is, I couldn't find that. And again, like when I first started to research this stuff, I was like, oh, let's see what's happened,
Yep.
around the area. Couldn't find anything. So I thought that was really cool that Indianapolis was kind of the closest that we could find.
Right.
Um, But this situation says this isn't just about buying and selling when you're trying to buy or sell a home. It's also about how people want to be treated when they're actually already in their home.
Yeah, for sure. And I was telling you this before we started, but it is crazy that, number one, we still have to talk about this, and that stuff like this still happens. It just seems ridiculous. I'm like, if you want to sell your home, we have a buyer. We'll sell your home. That type of thing. Like, why does all this stuff have to get in the way? You want to sell your home, and we can help you do that. Get over it and let's move on. But yeah, it's just ridiculous. But
I know it is hard to believe, especially, coming from the area that we're in, that this still happens, but it obviously does. When we list a home or when we're going over the purchase agreement, we do review this with every buyer and every seller, just to make sure they understand that these are the protected classes for the fair housing laws. And I usually stop and make a comment then, like, who really cares? At the end of the day, if you got the cash, if you got the financing, you get the house. Thankfully, I've never had anybody go beyond that. Interestingly enough, we have had people make some comments or ask some questions, and we just, as real estate agents, there's certain things, even if we did have knowledge, we're not going to answer those kinds of questions. I've had people say, like, hey, who lives in this neighborhood? Well, you're welcome to do all the research you'd like to do. As far as I know, human beings live in this neighborhood. So if you want to live next to human beings, good neighborhood to be in.
Exactly.
There's always statistics that people want to check that aren't in protected classes. If you want to make sure that it's not a high crime neighborhood, absolutely, we can help you out with that. We can make sure the neighbor's not a meth dealer, and there's no meth houses. We can do those kinds of things. But if you're asking, to be helped, to avoid certain neighbors in certain neighborhoods, maybe just call somebody else, because that's just not how we do business. And obviously, you're going to have a tough time finding anybody in Elkhart County who does business that way, because we've never had a complaint. So
and kind of going back to last week's episode about the buyer agency contracts, on there, you read through it, there's a paragraph where it talks about fair housing. And I've had it countless times where our buyers and our clients are like, you really have to disclose this? And I'm like, I do. It's here because it happened. So we have to go through this. And they find it more so, they don't think it's stupid. They're more like, this is still happening. Like, we still have to go over this stuff. And it is. That's why it's on there. So.
Yep. No, we did a whole course, as far as the Elkhart County Board of Realtors. We did some coursework, and we actually brought in an author who had authored a study that happened in, I want to say, Long Island, New York, but they followed a certain brokerage and had people go in and say, hey, we want to see this house. I don't think that house is, right for you guys, and kind of steered them away from it. And we'll talk a little bit more about how as agents, you have to be really careful about that. You don't want to steer somebody away. And then the next couple would come in and be like, oh, here's a great neighborhood for you, and put them right in that neighborhood. And they were doing it quite obviously based off of some of these protected classes. So I mean, it was right there. When you see the video of it, you're like, ooh, it's so cringy to watch, but obviously it happens. The example that we just gave was one of, basically harassment that was based off of race, but that's just one example. The National Fair Housing Alliance has reported, and this number will shock you, 33,000 housing discrimination complaints in a single year. Most of them, fortunately, I guess, as a real estate agent, do not come by real estate agents. I think that is increasingly rare. It's actually in rental housing. So it'd be landlords refusing to rent to certain groups. I think a lot of that is just a lack of education by landlords, not understanding who the protected classes are. Because it isn't actually, the number one causes are not racial. It's actually disability. So it's basically saying, hey, we can't rent this house out to you because we're not willing or able to make it a place that you could live in comfortably as a disabled person. That is the number one cause of complaints. So unfortunately, part of that is, home sales, sellers rejecting offers based off race or family status. It's one of the reasons, Nate, I know you're, being a little newer, obviously, to real estate. There was a time when we would do a lot of love letters, as we would call them. You'd send in your offer and you'd say, and here's a letter from my prospective buyers. Maybe here's even a cute picture of them. What a lovely family, right? Wouldn't you like to accept an offer from this family? Well, the problem was that could be used as a determining factor then for the seller, and it opened them up to liability. So I will not. Sadly, I actually do sometimes get these, I think, again, from agents who don't understand that you can't do that. I don't send them on to my seller, because now I'm opening my seller up to liability as well as myself. If they accept this offer, let's just make the example that it's this, adorable family with 3 kids. And then they've got another offer from a single person. and they say, oh, I really want this to go to this family. Well, that may be true, but now you are discriminating against someone because they don't have a full family. You know, their familial status is
Yep.
different. So it's
Yep.
just better to avoid those altogether. And, you know, as an association and as a national association, we no longer encourage those. In fact, we very strongly discourage them. So, you know, you may think you're doing it for innocent reasons, but at the end of the day,
Yep.
you're affecting someone else's opportunity to buy that property. So it's just better to avoid.
Yep. I've had a couple buyers in the past where they'll be like, hey, we've heard, you know, like we can send, you know, especially if it's like multiple offers, you know, we'd like to send a letter along and, you know, just kind of let them know why, you know, first time home buyers, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you write it up, I'm not sending it, and here's why. And they usually understand, but it's a thing of like, you write it, like, I guess good for you, but I'm not sending it. So
yeah, you know, it's one of those things. If someone wants to write a letter and put it in the mail and send it over, there's nothing we can do about that. We're not going to stop you from doing that. By all means, if you want to do it, do it. But again, you need to be aware of the fact that you may be exposing that seller to some liability. And in fact, you might be setting yourself up if the seller is aware of you know, that possibility. They may not accept your offer because you sent in that letter. So it's just something to be very careful about. Mortgage lenders, you know, are also at risk of this. Obviously, in the past, I think this occurred more frequently in the past, but obviously it still occurs today. Lenders basically offering worse terms to minority buyers is the situation that we've seen. Again, you just can't imagine how that would happen, but apparently it can. I think we're getting away from that because of rules and regs that have been put in place to kind of protect our consumers. But obviously that was a pretty big issue in the past, and apparently still can occur today, as hard as it is to believe that.
Yeah. And one thing too that's a little disturbing is how subtle these discrimination can be. Like agents steering buyers toward or away from certain neighborhoods based on race or assumptions about what they might prefer.
Yeah. That's it. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the house and it's about your comfort level, and neighborhoods do matter. You know, if you're driving through a neighborhood and you're someone who likes a nice, tidy neighborhood, you know, and you don't want to buy in an HOA because you don't want to have that level of control over what you do with your property, but you're driving around and the place next door has junk all over the yard, that's a determining factor. You know, that's the truth. But as agents, you know, we can point that out to you, but we're most certainly not going to point out to the racial demographic or the number of families that are in this neighborhood. If you've got an agent that's doing that, tell them to stop, please. You know, that's not okay. I don't think it happens, at least around here, but if that is happening and you're listening and you're an agent, please stop. You're going to get caught. Someone's going to file a complaint and you're going to get your license revoked. So there's just no place for that in the world that we're living in today. So Nate, I appreciate you bringing that point up. I guess the question now is, you know, how can buyers, sellers, and agents make sure they're following fair housing laws? You know, for buyers and renters, if you do suspect discrimination, document everything. You know, that's so key. Write down the times that it happened, the date that it happened, what was said by both parties, and report that back to the fair housing hotline. We're going to give you that number. I think here at the end, I've got that written down that we're going to provide you that number for the fair housing hotline. If you feel like you've been discriminated against, you have a resource out there. It's as simple as a phone call. You can also call the Elkhart County Board of Realtors, the South Bend Board, wherever you're at. You can even call the Indiana Association of Realtors. There are opportunities for you to report it, and we hope you will. As far as for sellers and landlords, you know, you need to set clear, non-discriminatory criteria for your applicants, you know, for when you get applications in, and stick to them. You know, don't change it up. Don't, allow yourself the pressure to, to fall under the guise of stereotypes. You know, treat people equally, treat people fair. And for agents, as we've said before, just always provide the same level of service and options to every client, regardless of their personal characteristics, how you view them, how you judge books by their covers. You know, Nate, I know I firmly believe we do a tremendous job of this. We don't care if you're buying $1 million home or a $40,000, well, they don't exist anymore, but a startup home, whatever the price may be. You know, I will go back I'll tell you a quick story early in my career. You know, it wasn't discriminatory because it was price-based, but there was an agent no longer in this area, shall we say, but they said, hey, I'm not going to work with these people. They're looking, again, this is a long time ago, but they said they're looking at homes in the $50,000, $60,000 price range. And the comment they made was, I don't get out of bed for anything in that price range. And I was like, wow, I'll take them. Like, no problem. So I found them a $60,000 home. And then when they went to sell it years later for $150,000, they listed it with me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that person would have gotten out of bed for 150. I would hope so. But that they have also referred me to their parents, to aunts and uncles. I have sold probably north of $1.5 million of real estate because I took that buyer on and treated them the same as everybody else. So
Right.
it's not just it's law out there, but it just makes sense to treat people well and treat them the same. So
Yeah.
hope agents, if you're listening, just do it. I think we do a great job of that already. So I'm on my pedestal probably for no reason.
One point though is about intent. So intent does matter. So even if a seller or a landlord doesn't mean to discriminate, if the outcome leads to discrimination, it's still illegal.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Nate. Intent isn't, like, hey, I'm going to go and discriminate against these people. If it's determined that you did, regardless of your intent, you're going to be in the same level of trouble.
Yep.
So again, make sure you understand the law. Follow up on this episode and ask us questions. We'd be happy to answer them. Call the board of realtors. They'll be happy to answer them as well. But make sure you understand, if you're in the real estate market in any capacity, make sure you understand what you're doing.
Yep.
At the end of the day, this isn't just about avoiding legal trouble. It's about creating stronger, more inclusive communities. When people have equal access to housing opportunities, neighborhoods tend to thrive, property values grow, and everyone benefits.
Yeah. And as real estate professionals, we have a responsibility to lead by example. The fact that Elkhart County has never had a fair housing complaint is something we should be proud of, which I am. I thought that was cool when you told me about that. But we should also keep working to educate and empower buyers and sellers to prevent discrimination before it happens.
Yeah. Well said, Nate. Well said. I think the future of real estate depends on this, the fairness, the transparency, and the inclusion that we can demonstrate as agents.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Nick, good conversation. Any final thoughts on fair housing?
Yeah, I just want to repeat that, fair housing affects us all, whether buying, selling, renting, investing. If you're involved in real estate in any capacity, make sure you know your rights, make sure you know your responsibilities. Again, we want more homeowners in this county, in this state, in this nation. All kinds of things get better when we increase home ownership. I'll go into that probably more in length at another episode. I've gone into it, at length in the past when I'm talking to different groups and governmental entities and just showing the numbers as far as, like how an area improves when home ownership increases. So my goodness, people, if you want a better life, if you want a better society, help people get into homes. That's really the key to doing it. If you are ever, or you suspect that you were ever involved in any kind of housing discrimination, please speak up. There's resources available. Like I said, call us, call the local board, the state board, or you can call the housing discrimination hotline, which I do have that number. It is 1-800-669-9777. I'm going to say that again. It is 1-800-669-9777.
Yep. And if you have any questions about fair housing, buying or selling, reach out to the Nic Wyse team. We're here to help and ensure that every real estate transaction is fair and equal for all.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. We came in shy of 20 minutes. Good job, Nate. Kept me on track. That is it for this episode of the Realty Rundown with the Nic Wyse team. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, as always, Nick knows, get wise replies. We'll see you next.